Hey guys, how's it going? Toofty here. So I've been playing around with the Iron Bomber recently, and I need to do another video on it. I just need to, because there's too much to discuss about this weapon. This will be the third video I've ever made about this weapon. I'll try and make this the last one. In the last one I didn't go into much depth. I basically just chatted about my opinion, why I don't really use it. But yeah, recently I picked it up again, just played around with it, and it felt like I was doing more work with it. I was putting out more damage. This is what it felt like. So I decided to create a little project for myself, a little bit of an experiment where I wanted to collect some stats of my gameplay and take a look at how the two weapons compare. And I'm also going to talk about two really important themes that came up in my last video in the comments section, and it's going to be awesome. Before we jump into the meat of this episode, I've noticed that a large majority of high-level demo players seem to be using this weapon. This isn't a comprehensive list, but here's a few I checked out. So as you can see, yeah, people seem to be moving towards the Iron Bomber. And that's another reason that I wanted to look at this a little bit more closely. So we're not really going to go through all the pros and cons of this weapon and look at the actual weapon stats. Here's another quick slide in case you are interested in that kind of thing, and in case you've missed my last videos on this topic. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple of really interesting comments I got in the last video I put out. I won't read it all the way through, but basically this guy is saying that he loves the fact that the differences between the two weapons are very subtle. He thinks it's an ideal example of a side grade and would love to see more weapons like it. So this is where I think opinion comes into it, because I'm not a massive fan of weapons where the stats are just ever so slightly dialed up and down, and therefore the differences are very subtle. But I know there's a big divide here, and some people love that kind of, fine-tuning of your gameplay kind of weapon, whereas I personally like the weapons that mean you're playing in a completely different way. For example, the Demo Knight, the Huntsman, that kind of thing. There are exceptions to this rule for me. For some reason the black box comes to mind. It's a dead simple concept, that's why I like that. But yeah, the main reason I'm not a fan of this is because, especially in this case where I feel like you don't have to play differently. I talked about this in my last video, so I won't spend too long on this, but you're essentially doing the same thing and you happen to be getting more or less damage depending on what weapon you're using. At the very least, I want a weapon to make you have to intentionally change your behaviour for you to be able to see a different result, be it positive or negative. Imagine you have two players of absolute equal ability, hypothetically of course. You give one the Iron Bomber and you give one the stock grenade launcher. In this magical scenario, they play the exact same game. My gut feeling is that one of them would do more damage than the other. And that, it doesn't make any sense. That's not a side grade, that's an upgrade, right? But we'll talk about this a bit more in a second when we take a look at this kind of stats that I took from my own gameplay. The second comment I wanted to very briefly cover was this one. This guy says, people feel like they hit more pipes because the physics are different. Stock goes further. Now, this guy has kept it a little bit vague, but there was a bit of a thread here, and you get this comment come up a lot. The idea of the actual projectiles of the Iron Bomber travelling in a different way to the pipes. Now, there is some crazy funky stuff going on in the world of physics in TF2. There are things like air resistance that do have an effect on how projectiles work. So this is one of the more popular videos that people refer to when talking about this. I've popped a link in the description. So this is a side-by-side comparison of the speed of a bunch of projectiles. So what I found a little bit confusing here is that in the first example, the Iron Bomber clearly goes further. But in the second example, which is slowed down, the Iron Bomber and the grenade launcher are completely equal. So I'm not sure which one's correct. Unfortunately, I couldn't see any comments that explain what's going on there. But either way, even if the Iron Bomber does travel slightly faster, like in this example here, at the distance where it kind of matters, at medium to close range, where you're going to actually try and hit direct hits, the difference is quite insignificant. And I think it wouldn't have a huge impact on how many direct hits you actually get. But it's not just the speed. What about the spin? What about the hitbox size? Well, I couldn't actually find a good resource that explains the hitbox size for each of these projectiles, so I'd love to hear from you in the comments below if you do have a good link for that stuff. I'm assuming they're similar. Obviously, when the two projectiles hit the ground, that's where the shape of the grenade has a huge impact, but these two weapons differ significantly in this respect anyway. So for the sake of this discussion, I wanted to focus on purely direct hits and if the aerodynamics, the shape of the projectile, all that stuff is having an effect. And I just can't see any reason as to why it would be, except perhaps like the placebo effect, because people say it just feels good and they're hitting more directs. If you have any thoughts on this, especially if there's anything that I've missed, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Final comment, very important. Iron Bomber equals 4 barrels for grenades. Grenade launcher equals 6 barrels for grenades. Checkmate, atheists. Okay, I just thought I'd leave that there. Very wise words. Anyway, let's move on to some real life juicy gameplay stats. Okay, so like I said, I just wondered if there was a way of actually using data to tell us if one is categorically better than the other. So I tried to put together this experiment. This was the method I was going to use. I would play on one map, I would play a bunch of games. In the end, it turned out that I played 30 games. I chose Badwater because it was a map that I love, and I thought it would take the longest for me to actually get bored of this map. And what I was going to do is simply measure a bunch of different stats as I played, 15 games with each weapon. Obviously, the more games, the better, but I had to draw the line somewhere for my own sanity. And I was going to measure the damage, how long I was playing the game. I also noted down how many kills I got, how many points I got, and of course, I didn't use my sticky bomb launcher. I used the sticky jumper as my secondary. That all being said, I'm still not massively happy about this method because there's just so many variables, right? There's lag, team balance, how well am I playing? Am I fatigued after playing, 10 rounds of the same map? I tried to at least remove those games that were ridiculously rolly, so especially if we were attacking, I noticed, and it was a complete roll. There was only one or two of them. For every other game I kept in, some of them I played really well, some of them I played less well, but hopefully, because there were so many games, it kind of evened out. So let's take a look at what I ended up with. Now, obviously, all this is going to be per minute because just saying how many kills I got overall would, mean nothing because I didn't play the exact same amount of minutes with each weapon. So yeah, here are the results. Now, I realise those second two stats are a little bit odd, not something that you normally pay attention to, but I thought I'd throw them in there anyway, just in case it highlighted anything. So, interestingly, this kind of supports my gut feeling that I was doing more damage or more work with the Iron Bomber, as we can see on the left. And this is the important stat, by the way. We can almost ignore everything else. Damage per minute is the most important thing. If you don't watch much high-level competitive TF2, it's your job as a demo man to put out lots of damage. So yeah, my damage per minute is reasonably significantly higher with the Iron Bomber than it is with the grenade launcher. I know the amount of games I played is not that many. Ideally, we'd have a sample of 1,000 games. It was a decent amount of hours with each weapon, right? And I'm pretty sure these results do have some meaning and do give us some indication as to what's going on. As for the kills per minute and the points per minute, they're actually much closer. Now, I know you're probably thinking, points per minute? What does that even mean? What's the point of that? I was kind of thinking, that might give some indication as to how many assists I'm getting. Because my theory is, this extra damage is purely coming from splash damage. It's not coming from direct hits. It's about those rollers that land nearer the enemy and therefore get more damage onto them. So following from that, I thought I might get more assists as well, but it turns out that the points I was getting were identical, so I doubt that's the case. And the same goes for, measuring the kills. I wasn't necessarily sure what it would tell me. I thought I may as well measure it just in case something crazy happened and, maybe I was doing more damage with one, but getting more kills with the other. But it turns out they're very close. So yeah, as I already mentioned, my conclusion is, because of the extra weight of the Iron Bomber grenades, and the shorter fuse time that's super important and kind of gets overlooked sometimes, these two things in combination mean that I'm getting more splash damage out than the traditional grenade launcher. Which might be fine if I was using it differently, but it really didn't feel like I was. It felt like I was playing in the exact same way with both weapons. There was one other thing I looked at in terms of the stats, and that was the difference between attacking and defending. So for this I put aside what weapon I was using. I was just wondering, do you do more damage? Do you get more kills when you're attacking or when you're defending? Now I would have thought, obviously when you're defending, you do way more damage because you're kind of at an advantage. And obviously this depends on what class you're using. But in this case, it turns out that I was doing slightly more damage when I was attacking, if these stats are anything to go by, which was really surprising for me. I guess the combination of weapons I had were very offensive, so it does kind of make sense in some respect. I also wanted to measure this for another reason, and that is because I didn't have the exact same amount of rounds of attacking and defending with each weapon. As a matter of fact, I happened to measure a few more rounds of attack with the stock grenade launcher, so if anything, the results we saw before are skewed slightly in favour of the stock grenade launcher. To be honest with you, some of these stats are kind of interesting anyway, regardless of the conversation. Kills per minute, I just thought I'd get more kills per minute, but in reality, I guess, sometimes you're respawning, you're getting to the front line, you're running around. Getting approximately a kill per minute seems really low to me, but fair enough, what are you going to do? I think my damage per minute's okay, based off my memory of seeing logs after competitive games, and points per minute, again, kind of interesting to know. Why the heck not? Before we move on to the last part of this episode, there's a few things I wish I did differently. I wish that I got my KD ratio. For some reason, I didn't decide to write down my deaths, So it was a bit of a shame that I didn't grab that. There may have been some cool stuff I could have done with it. I was wondering, could I even just look at games where I was MVP to make sure I was doing well in all the games? Because let's be honest, if I just happened to have 2 or 3 way awesomer games with the Iron Bomber, it would skew the results quite significantly. So as I said, these aren't perfect, but they're kind of the best I could do for the time being. So I think the Iron Bomber has quite a following, and some of you guys are quite precious about it, but if these results are anything to go by, it feels like it's just doing more damage with the exact same playstyle, which is not what you want. Does it need a tweak? I don't know. I don't want to enrage you guys. I don't want to trigger your faces off. I don't know what you could do with it. As we discussed before, it's a weapon about fine-tuning your playstyle, not completely changing the way you play. And I struggle with these ones because they're just less interesting to me. When I think of changing the weapon, the first thing I think of is just dialing up those stats, giving it more contrast. Whatever it does differently to the stock, make it do that differently even more, if you see what I mean. For example, even less explosive radius, even quicker fuse time, that kind of thing. Anyway guys, I'm probably going to go ahead and switch to this weapon just because it does feel like I'm doing better with it. It's a shame because I do love my stock grenade launcher, and I'll be honest, my stock grenade launcher looks better. It's got an awesome skin and the stats I've got on it are amazing, so you know, that's all the important stuff, let's be honest. But yeah, let me know if you disagree with anything I've said today. I know there's a lot more to these weapons than what we've talked about today. There's the pros and cons that we just quickly brushed over. I think those are the reasons you should be using the weapon. You know, maybe you want a grenade jump as a demo night, maybe you like the fact that they can't be air blasted back to you as much. Those little tactical things I think are really cool, but the fact that I was playing in the same way and not really using any of these techniques, and yet still I felt like I was doing more damage, it just feels a little bit wrong to me. Anyway guys, thanks for watching. Pop in the description below, follow me on Twitter, jump into our Discord, it's absolutely joyous. You will not believe your luck, and join me on my streams. We have a lot of fun, and I'll see you guys in the next video.